So my central point is that 1637 was a different time, different era. It was a crazy time. There's lots of things going on. They just invented the table knife, so in France, so only human beings, just now could they butter their bread like civilized, classy people, at least if you were around that French inventor. The Dutch, while colonizing the Americas and the Africas, went to overly ambitious ends on tulips. They had a large recession in 1637, the tulip mania, because they overinvested in tulips. They were buying tulips for 12 fucking acres, right, and $100,000. So they overinvested. This is the Dutch. So, I don't know, they're colonizing, they're spending way too much money on tulips, the recession, their fucking economy crashes. And it was just to own a strain, just a variety of plant. Here's a plant, here's the seed, all right, give me 12 acres or $100,000. I was talking to this American woman about Thanksgiving, and I asked her, well, what do you know about Thanksgiving? How do you understand Thanksgiving right now? And when I asked her what Thanksgiving Day meant, she said, just breezily, just offhand, it's where we gave the Indians some food. It is where we gave the Indians some food. I have major problems with that entire sentence. It's what she's talking about is the myth. The imagery comes from the 1621 meal, which wasn't Thanksgiving. There was no official decoration or prayer or anything. It was a festival, it was a business arrangement, so it wasn't an official Thanksgiving. There's been lots of Thanksgivings that have been declared, and it seems like you have to try to figure out which one was the very original one or the first one, but Thanksgiving is just a day you give thanks for something that was happening. And the official Thanksgiving was given in Mystic River Massacre, the Mystic River Massacre. Right afterwards, John Winthrop issued an official Thanksgiving. I think William Bradford has a 1623 declaration also. And I'm going to try to address all of these. But with the 1623, it's almost like the 1637 declaration. It's like, well, it's not really the 1621 meal. They declared Thanksgiving. It's kind of like the Thanksgiving story. Let's just go with that one. And, of course, the Republicans are loving the 1623 Declaration of Independence Declaration of Thanksgiving, my bad. And it was the Declaration of Thanksgiving. I don't know if it was a day of prayer or an official day or how they actually went about it in 1623, but that's when they changed from having a communal sort of communist society where they were sharing property to everybody owns their own corn, owns their own house. And then that's sort of the beginnings of America. And so they're celebrating it. Oh, that's the beginnings of America. That's what the Thanksgiving thing was all about. They're being just disingenuous. There's a Texas town that said that they had the first Thanksgiving in the 1500s. So why does it keep on getting, George Washington declared it several times, Abraham Lincoln declared it several times after a battle when they won or lost, and then Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to change it. So that's sort of the president's involvement. What were their motivations? Why did George Washington eventually, do his first day of Thanksgiving? It probably had something to do with killing Native Americans too. I believe that it was the 1637 Declaration of Independence. After every time they conquered the Native Americans, they declared a day of Thanksgiving. They wanted the 1637 Thanksgiving to be celebrated every year, the 8th month of the 12th day, something like that. And so that is what we are celebrating today. So, we think of the 1621 imagery and that meal, and even if we want to talk about William Bradford, I would love to talk about them fuckers. Wittawamets, Miles Standish putting Wittawamets' head on a pike. The Wampanoags were the ones that actually did the land. Squanto was kidnapped several times, put into slavery. The biggest Uncle Tom ever. His name means divine rage, but he's actually the biggest Uncle Tom that you've ever met in your life. But the biggest one was the Wampanoags. Within 50 years were exterminated by the English. So the people who actually gave the food, it wasn't, we didn't give any fucking food to anybody. We were, if you want to say we being white people, my ancestors didn't get here until 1869, so it wasn't my fucking ancestors here in the 1600s. But if you want to talk about what the American woman, she says we give them food. So what she's talking about, white people. So that's what we're doing, is associating with the national identity of of this, this imperializing nation. Because if we started the American Revolution, we all can agree that those were good, times, being free, governing ourselves. And at least that gives us a foundation, to springboard off of. But I'm getting off on a tangent, but my essential point is the whole sentence is fucking bullshit. The white people, if we're to say, okay, then that means we didn't give anybody food. We couldn't even fucking take care of ourselves. Half of the pilgrims died. In the very first year, there was 100 pilgrims that came here, and then half of them fucking died in the very first year because they couldn't, live through the winter. They're looking for gold, and they're looking for all these raw materials and resources. So they weren't experienced hunters or anything like that. They were fucking speculators. They were businessmen wanting to play captain or adventurer, right? And they get there, half of them fucking died to disease. They probably were cannibalizing each other, eating each other. They were stealing whatever shit they could steal from natives, probably killing whatever natives they could get away with. And the Wampanoag people had agreed, and there was a big Thanksgiving meal to allow them to stay right where they were at. And even though Massasoit, Chief Massasoit, who was the chief of the Wampanoags being the Native Americans, who actually brought the food, we were the ones that ate the food. We were the takers. We didn't give any fucking food. They taught us how to grow food. They taught us how to live and how to exist. And there was no extra food for us to give. It was a business arrangement. The Wampanoags were probably trying to intimidate the English. There's only 50 English, and then 90 Wampanoags come up. Well, what the fuck are you going to do in that point? You could fight and die. You could say, hey, why don't y'all sit down for a meal? Give whatever little bit of food that you got. Try to be fucking nice to them. But the Native Americans, the Wampanoag, turned it into a ally meeting. Why don't you be our allies, and against our Native American adversaries, you ally with us, the Wampanoags, and the Plymouth Plantation become allies. A military alliance was handed down. The Plymouth Plantation got permission to stay on the land, the Patuxent lands, the lands of Squanto's people. What a great legacy Squanto leaves for his people. He's the last of the Patuxent, and then once he dies of just a fucking nosebleed or something, probably poisoned or some shit. And he was an interpreter who fucked over the Native Americans many times. But just because, he learned English and shit, he totally fucked over I don't know if you could blame it on him if he was a kid, but whatever. White people were not they were the benefactors. They weren't the givers. They were the takers on Thanksgiving Day. If you want to believe the myth, the imagery, which isn't a Thanksgiving Day. There was no Thanksgiving given that we know of that wasn't written down. It wasn't something that was even fucking mentioned. They didn't even have turkey. They had a bird. They killed some white-tailed deer, and then had some crops and stuff. So specifically, it's not even a turkey day. It's just a bird. They went and got some fowl. That's what they said. They called birds fowl back then. So they got some fowl, and then today we interpret it as let's just eat a shit ton of fucking thing of turkey. And that actually is another genocide. I saw a vegan or, animal rights, I don't know what you're going to say, but she pointed out that the fucking turkeys are being genocided every fucking year. That's a good-ass comparison. Christmas trees for Christmas, right? So the Chainsaw Massacre. So my point with when we give the Indians some food, no, it's not when we give the fucking food. We didn't do anything. We weren't even fucking there. Even if you want to say, well, white people were there, okay, well, we weren't glorifying ourselves. We weren't doing so well and had a bountiful feast and just want to share with the fucking neighborhood, and we're just so kind, and it was our Christian duty to give a shit. No, it wasn't like that at all. Eventually, after that 1621 meal, you have the war, Metacomet's War. They also call it King Philip's War, but Metacomet's War is where the Wampanoag and the English just have a full frontal battle. They just murder and gun and cut each other down. So if that's the story you want to go with, that's the imagery. That's the imagery. It wasn't, the official Thanksgiving wasn't from 1621, but that meal where they sat down, the Native Americans and the whites and the Pilgrims, and they had like a 3-day festival. That did happen. You know, it was a footnote in history, but because of holidays, they took this footnote in history and made it the symbol for the entire holiday. If you just want to take that mythological bullshit, that's not us doing good, it's them doing good for us, and then we being brothers, right? So, hey, thanks for not killing us, let's be allies, and let's try to do things better. Well, clearly the agreement was in our favor, in the white people's favor, in the English, the Plymouth Plantation peoples, the white Protestant, the WASP's favor, and not the Wampanoags, not the brown-skinned Wampanoag Native Americans. Because within 50 years, they would be putting not just Wittawama's head on a pike, but the Metacomet. Metacomet was butchered, quartered, sent all over the place, his head put on a pike. So the Wampanoags, the Chief Massowit was the chief that had give all the fucking food to the English. Eventually it's either his son or his son's son. 50 years, 2 generations of chiefdoms. Once he died, then his son took his place. Eventually Metacomet becomes the chief. There's a big-ass fucking war between the Wampanoags and the English, and they wipe the Wampanoags out. So it's genocide from the 1621 story, the 1623 story, that they declared a day of Thanksgiving but don't have shit to do with Native Americans. So that's sort of cherry-picking. In a way, I guess it balances the 1637 event out. But what is the actual story of Pilgrims and Native Americans? In fact, I think Thanksgiving is such a fucking insult because it shows for one glimmering moment that there is a tiny bit of humanity. But if you look at the centuries of Thanksgiving, it was a bloodbath. It was a genocidal, psychotic fucking bloodbath. And 80% might have been killed by disease, but the other 20% were systematically hunted and shot and pushed off their land until their whole culture, everything was raped, and everything that they had, this land was by God given to the Native Americans. God gave it to them. So by right of conquest, by right of finders keepers, right of fucking thieving, white collar criminal bullshit. You gotcha. No, fuck that. That's bullshit. And so if the Thanksgiving is to be the Native Americans and the Pilgrims and to think about what that story is and where we are today, where are the Native Americans today? They're on plantations somewhere. I don't know. I don't see them. It's white people all over the place. So clearly the English colonists did something, right? Something happened here. And can we ever get justice on dark and bloody ground? These are big questions, but I think that's, we need to take care of our Native American populations. Why not work on integration? I don't know why we're still separating them into a different area because they have, the God's law or something that all this is theirs and all this is their land, so they can't hold their, arguments up in court. I don't even understand a lot of this stuff, but we do need to make that right. It's such an insult because just compare it to slavery. If one day, slavery was horrendous and horrible and brutal, if one day there was a slave master, and again, if you do the Thanksgiving, it would be the slave. One day the slave had a piece of bread and the slave shared this with the slave master a piece of bread. Hey, master, I got a piece of bread for you. And then they sat and they looked at the sunset. Is that a fucking good day? Is that a day we're going to celebrate? Remember, slavery was really bad, but that one day when the slave found some extra bread and gave it to the master, wasn't that a nice day? They looked at the sunset, they shared a moment together. Yeah, it's a nice fucking moment, but that's not the story of slavery. It's not the story of American history. And so I think we need a story that accurately depicts American history, and it was systematic. It was institutionalized. It went over and over again from the very beginning, since Christopher Columbus. It was a genocide. And in some respects, being an empire today, 1 million dead in Iraq, that's, we're still doing it in a different way. But that's sort of what that's our business model, right? When we start floundering, we just take more land, and then with all that land and new resources, well, shit, no wonder we're doing okay. And then this was, I don't want to say undiscovered country, but since we sort of was able to plot out the map, it seems like our nation states are stronger than the world's nation states. So America was doing actually a phenomenal job on this fucking part of the world, but we're an empire and we do a lot of shitty things. Well, and just below the Rio Grande, we do a lot of shitty things. So I can look at the span of American history and just think of it as being one big-ass genocide. Hitchens kind of got into me a little bit, but, I think Palestine, when I think of Israel and Palestine, I think the American people don't think about the Native Americans that they had stole land from. Just like it wasn't my ancestors, but I feel fucking bad about it. There's white privilege, and I benefit from white privilege. And so that's, so in a way, I had a better sort of head start, or I got some things going that they don't have. And so that's not right. That's not fair. So I feel bad, and I can look back upon history. Who gives a shit? 1637. If you can't say there's a Hitler in 1637 and fuck that guy, why would you look at a bad fucking guy 400 years ago and try to celebrate him? That's like Leopold II of Belgium. He killed 15 million Africans. He's not called Hitler. He was the king of Belgium in the 1800s or something. Fucking killed a lot of Africans. That's not a good fucking guy. Leopold II of Belgium, that fucking king's not a good guy. I'm not going to fucking lie just because if I was a Belgian, I wouldn't want to just lie just to fucking, hey, well, Belgians, we never do anything wrong. If I'm a German, I'm going to tell them about the Hitler and how that shit happened and how it was bullshit, how to prevent something like that from happening. And the same thing with America. They say you can't judge other time periods by your own time period, and I kind of understand that argument, but fuck it, I'm going to do that. Slavery was bullshit, murdering people, pushing people off of their own fucking land, that's bullshit. And so what happened in 1637 was fucking bullshit, what the Pilgrims did, 1621, 1623, the lies, sign a treaty, agree with the Wampanoags, get all of them to fucking fight, divide and conquer, and then what they did in 1637 was it was stunning. It stunned all the Native Americans that somebody would be so gruesome in the murder of the Pequot, killing babies, killing women, killing old people, and that happened pretty quickly. Fucking 15 years. They was here for 15 years, the Pilgrims were, and now they're fucking killing babies, and that shocked the shit out of everybody, even the Mohawks. The fucking Mohawks, the Iroquois Mohawks, killed Sassacus, chopped off his head and give the scalp to the English as a show of appreciation. Sassacus tried to fucking say, hey, these English, what the fuck? But the Native Americans, unfortunately not all of them were united to fight. That's also another lesson that we get from 1637, the Mystic Massacre. You had Uncas and Sassacus. Why couldn't they get along? One went Pequot, the other one went Mohegan, and then now where are the Mohegans and the Pequot today? I think there's like some federal recognized tribes, but they didn't stay, they didn't fight. If they would have united their forces and fought against the common enemy, then they would still be here today. So, the onus isn't just on, it's give credit where credit is due. The white people murdering Native Americans, taking their land isn't good. Native Americans killing each other isn't good. So can we agree that murder isn't good? Even if 500 years ago murder was totally fine, it's fucking wrong, it's bullshit. And so when I read about 15, 16, 1700s and there's murder, I still think it's bullshit. I still have a sense of outrage about it. So, murder, rape, stealing, violence, it's some of the worst shit that one person can do to another person. And that is timeless. That's an eye for an eye. Doing to others, you have them doing to you. And so that goes on forever and ever. So, 1637 is a different fucking time frame, right? Unfortunately, I don't know why that myth even pervaded, and then the myth is so fucked up that some American women evidently think that we give food to the Native Americans, Let's see, if we had been there, they would have given us land that we stole, right? They would let us keep the land, they fed us. Because like shit, some Americans don't even know the myth of Thanksgiving, let alone the ugly truth about it.